Yes, I have, and I will not shut up about it. No, actually, it was 2 years ago. The horniness between these two. If that doesn't sell you on it right there, I don't know what will. It's gonna live in my head rent-free. Hey y'all, it's Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video, I'm gonna be giving you some romance recommendations of books I bet you probably have never heard of. Alright, so before we get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, and you gotta tell me in the comments what is your favorite underrated romance book. This is the final of my romance-focused videos for Valentine's Day. Of course, had to celebrate it, seeing as how I read a lot of romance books. And shout out to my Buns and Roses TBR jar projects I've done for the last 2 years. Links to those in the cards up above, because those have definitely helped me to broaden my horizons, have brought more and smaller authors to my attention, and has really added to my TBR as well. So I went through my Goodreads Red Shelf and sorted by number of ratings to find the least popular romance books that I think need way more attention. Let's go ahead and dive right in. First up with an indie romance, Black Witch Magic by Mila Nix. This is actually the perfect romance book to read in November because it's actually a great bridge between Halloween and Christmas time. We're following Celine, who's a nerdy librarian during the day and a witch at night. However, her family is actually cursed, meaning she is not able to leave this small town, even though majority of the town doesn't really treat her very well. However, things in her life definitely take a turn whenever Aiden, this prickly paranormal investigator, comes to town along with his coworker for Christmas, and he is actually looking into the fabled story of this evil witch known as Luna Blackstone, Celine's grandmother. I read this one for a witchy romance 5x5 in October last year. I'll put a link to that in the cards. No, actually it was 2 years ago. But this was super cute. It feels kind of like BuzzFeed Unsolved meets Practical Magic. It's got the really cute romance. It does have a little bit of spice. It has a fun mystery going on. And then of course there's the witchy magical realism sprinkled throughout. I also think the author did a pretty good job of weaving in a little bit of commentary and some heavier themes around the magical plot line. And it's actually the first in a series which is continuing to follow the same couple as they take future steps into their relationship. I really enjoyed the first one. I actually ended up lending it to somebody at my romance book club and only realized while filming this video that I still need to get it back. But I also am still intrigued to try out more of this author's work. In a little bit of a different direction is a historical romance by Bethany Bennett, Dukes Do It Better. And this was actually my first historical romance where I learned I actually can like this subgenre. So this one actually has a really fun setup where we were following Emma, who after her debut into society unfortunately got pregnant and has since been living in this very small town, raising her son, surviving as a widow. But while in this small town, she ends up having a little bit of a fling with this very sexy naval captain, Malachi. The two of them definitely don't think anything is going to come of this. However, whenever Emma ends up traveling to London for the season to hang out with her friends, turns out Malachi has actually recently come into a dukedom. And there's actually a fair amount of overlap in their social circles. Plus, there is sort of a letters element to the story where Emma writes in a diary, and she does so in a format as though she's writing to a long-lost love. Well, Malachi actually ends up finding one of these diaries and slowly starts to fall in love with the author of this, but does not realize it is Emma. Honestly, there are so many positive things I could say about Malachi, because hot naval captain who then eventually has to become all prim and proper duke, but doesn't really care about the power of the dukedom and actually is genuinely a very good person, very respectful of the heroine, understands that she is a package deal, pretty good father figure, and also the horniness between these two is just amazing. On the opposite side, I did really enjoy the character work that is done around Emma. I felt like she was a very strong woman who has dealt with some unfortunate circumstances in a really great way, has not allowed anything to bring her down, and continues to move forward to try and ensure the best life for herself and her child. I also was really impressed with the plot line of the story, because this isn't like a traditional setup for a romance. There's not a third act breakup. These two actually have a serious conflict around the halfway point, and I was really impressed at how the plot continued moving forward to see the relationship continue to develop and evolve between the two of them. I thought it was a really refreshing change of pace in a romance novel where sometimes they can get a little formulaic in the plot lines. So anytime there's one that breaks that usual pattern, I really appreciate it. This is also the third in a series. I still need to go back and read the prior ones, and I'm really excited to do that. I have since read more of Bethany Bennett's work and continue to really enjoy the character work she does, the relationship she develops between the two characters, and she's also very funny. Next up is one where you've probably heard of other books by this author, but but this is from her backlist, and again, I think it needs more attention. That's gonna be Slam Dunked by Love by Jamie Wesley. I absolutely blasted through this audiobook because the two main characters are so much fun. This is one of those romance books that kind of gave me the feeling of fan fiction, where it starts out a little silly, but the character work is really great, and the relationship between the two main characters just drags you into the story. So we start out following Caitlin, who ends up securing an invite to this big gala for this basketball team in order to try and confront her father for abandoning her mom when she was a kid, especially now that he is the successful basketball coach with this really prim and proper family man appearance. However, at the event, she ends up meeting Brady, who has just recently become a member of this team and is really determined to not get all drawn into the media frenzy. He isn't worried about relationships. He really just wants to focus on being successful with his team. But a kind of awkward encounter ends up resulting in the two of them faking being in a relationship for the event, and sparks quickly fly between the two of them. Like I said, Brady is really trying to focus on his job, and Caitlin has always sworn she will never date an athlete, but it's really hard to deny the chemistry that the two of them have. First up, this does start with fake dating, but as somebody who's not really a fan, I really appreciated that it didn't get blown out of proportion, it didn't drag out for way too long, and it wasn't used as this crutch to try and continue causing conflict between the two of them. I also really liked Brady's character, even though at the start he does feel a little stereotypical alpha male, especially in sports romances. I feel like that's really common, but pretty quickly we see this man has just unfortunately been burned one too many times and is pretty hesitant to trust Caitlin. But like I said, there's that whole fan fiction element where like Caitlin isn't really impressed that he's a famous athlete, and of course that makes him want her more. This was one of those where I genuinely felt very convinced by a relationship that was developing between the two of them. I also felt like everything they go through in the story meant that I could see these two actually lasting after the book ended, which is not necessarily always the case. And oh my god, the spice. Like I said, this author's more recent series gets more attention, but I definitely think more people need to go back to read this one. This is the second in the series, another one where I need to read the other books. I know, I have so many romance series going on right now. Next up is one that if you've been on my channel since the end of last year, you're probably like, Nat, you have definitely talked about this book so much. Yes, I have, and I will not shut up about it because it deserves all the love. That's gonna be The Lady Sparks of Flame by Elizabeth Everett. Oh my god, I did not know that I was going to love this book so much when I picked it up. This was actually one of my best books in 2025. So I will say this is set in the same universe as the author's prior series, and I imagine the events of this do kind of spoil some things for the prior series. If you're a real stickler about that, maybe check out A Lady's Formula for Love first. I need to backtrack to those books. So in this one, we start out following Phoebe, who has actually been exiled from London because of some not great things she was involved in her past. However, her father has recently passed and she is allowed to return to London in order to help her mother work through his estate, manage all of his affairs, and set everything in order so that her mom can continue to survive. Things are definitely not as easy as she's anticipating. Then in walks Sam, who is an entrepreneur actually hoping to purchase her father's estate and maybe turn it into a business. So the two of them end up working together to get through this gigantic project, and slowly a friendship starts to develop between the two of them. Phoebe is 100% the black cat, and Sam is such a golden retriever. Very fun opposites attract here that I really loved. There is a little bit of a mystery plot that pops up around the halfway point, but I would say a lot of this book is really just focused on the character work between the two of them, exploring Phoebe's background, her trauma, and the ways she is trying to heal and move forward from that, and Sam coming to learn more about her and starting to understand why Phoebe is the way she is, and slowly kind of pulling her out of her shell, showcasing to her that she can be happy once more. Sam is definitely one of those where like he was so close to being too perfect. He has a little bit of his own issues that he's working through, constantly putting up this happy-go-lucky front to protect who he really is, and I loved watching this relationship bloom between the two of them. Phoebe is also a really great female character who is not necessarily always likable. She's very abrasive, she's kind of ruthless at the start, but at the same time I always was rooting for her. I always wanted her to like figure figure everything out and, you know, it end up with Sam. It's also a little saucy, a little spicy. There's one specific scene in this, it's gonna live in my head rent-free for forever. There was even a time or two where this actually made me tear up. Yes, it was one of my best books of 2025 for a reason. I will not stop talking about it. Please go read it. Next up is one that I have recommended before, but it has been a good few years. However, it officially wrapped up recently, and it still does not have enough love on Goodreads. That's going to be the Tripping Over You series. This is a graphic novel series. If you love Heartstopper and you're looking for something that gives a similar feel, I would definitely suggest checking these out. I actually read this entire series as it was coming out online. I think the series started in like 2013, and I probably jumped on in like 2015, I think, and it only just recently wrapped up. So like I loved these two boys. So this is a queer romance mixed with a coming of age story. I'm pretty sure they're like high school age, but the two of them start to become friends, and then eventually their relationship does develop into something more. There are some heavier elements mixed into the series, namely around Liam's mental health, but I think this also does a really great job of kind of diving into different issues you can have in a relationship as you start to grow together. I think where this starts, they're like roughly 17, 18, and it continues until they're in their early 20s. And you really get to see how their relationship blossoms and evolves over those years, how they work through graduating, finding jobs, getting apartments. It's another one that definitely has fantastic character work in both of the leads, which makes you all the more invested in the romance. I think this is now officially becoming a graphic novel series, and I'm pretty sure they're up to volume 3 now. I probably should try and get my hands on like the actual physical copies of these to see how that translates to reading it online. But like I said, I loved this one so much that I'm pretty sure I followed it for nearly a decade. So if that doesn't sell you on it right there, I don't know what will. Rounding back to historical romance is another one that after I read, I wouldn't shut up about. That's going to be Forever Her Bachelor by Cecilia Renee. This was another one of the first historical romance books I read, and was one where, listen, it may be fantastical to give your female character so much agency, so much freedom, so much power in a historical setting, but I don't freaking care because it resulted in a heroine that I loved dearly. And let me just say, the hero is such a simp for her. This is also like a amalgamation of so many freaking tropes, and somehow they all work together very well. We start out following Chauncey and Pippa, who were childhood best friends and neighbors. And as Pippa grew older and was about to come out into society, they actually worked out a deal that they would get engaged so she would not have to marry some old crusty upper echelon of the ton guy, because unfortunately Pippa's parents passed when she was young, and she now lives with her aunt and uncle, and her uncle has quite the gambling problem. Chauncey's father does agree to the engagement, but says he needs to take 1 year to tour the continent, and then he can come back and marry Pippa. And so when he does that, he returns, and Pippa has called off the engagement and will not speak to him. This results in a quick downslide in Chauncey's life, and now it's about 9 years later, and they are literally in a circumstance that they had been trying to prevent with their prior engagement. Pippa is now promised to this older man. She is going to be like his 4th wife, unfortunately. And Chauncey, who is now a duke, has just learned that apparently there is a stipulation that he actually has to be married by the time he is 35, or he will not get all of the assets that come with the dukedom. So unfortunately, they are now the solution to one another's problems, but Pippa hates what Chauncey has become, and Chauncey doesn't understand why Pippa called off their engagement in the first place. This was delicious. I loved everything about this. Pippa was such a strong heroine. She had her own side hustle. She knew self-defense. She was not willing to put up with any man's BS. She was opinionated and proud, and I loved everything about her, which, like I said, on the opposite side, Chauncey also loved everything about her, which then made me like Chauncey. Baby's kind of a hot mess at the start, but Renee did a phenomenal job with his character and doing a really great exploration of his toxic viewpoints and really having to work through those and understand the problems with them to become a person that he actually thinks is worthy of being with Pippa. It was really emotional and heart-wrenching at times. It's got truly phenomenal lines. But after they become engaged, it also starts to get a little bit more spicy because Pippa may still hate Chauncey, but she is willing to use his body for science. There is such great chemistry between the two of them because they have such a history. The pining that goes on at the same time is just absolutely immaculate. And then again, the spice. Like I said, this has a lot going on, but somehow it just all worked out so well. It was intoxicating when I was reading it. I could not stop. I never wanted to put it down. This is another series series. I've since backtracked to read the first one, which I did enjoy. I do own the second. I need to get to that one. And she did tell me a fourth is coming in the series. I cannot wait. Alrighty, and then last, but certainly not least, is one that I was hesitant to put it on this list because like technically there's a romance. I don't know if I would necessarily say the romance is the main plot line here, but it's got a romance and I do think this series needs way more attention. A Light Amongst the Shadows by Kelly York and Rowan Altwood. Like I said, I would really say this is more of a historical mystery series, but it also has a very cute queer romance between James and William. These two are actually students at a boarding school. Another one that is definitely opposites attract. James is like the charismatic, charming guy. William is the socially anxious loner. However, the both of them end up bonding over the fact that they can hear and are seeing ghosts around their school's property. And when students actually start disappearing, these two are the only ones willing to start investigating because everybody else gets punished when anything about this is brought up. Like I said, definitely more historical mystery, and it's a really fun ride. It has some horrific elements mixed into it, but the relationship between the two boys is also just so pure. It does continue on in the next book in the series, and I really like seeing how these two mature together, seeing the ways that the relationship they start does grow along with them. It does also have some heavier topics in it, so check trigger warnings if you need them. But like I said, this series does not get nearly enough love, and I want more people to read it. I have been waiting for the fourth book in this series for years now. Maybe me putting it on this recommendation list and other people reading it will encourage the authors to come out with the next one. All right, y'all, so that is officially it for today. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, let's leave a basketball emoji for Slam Dunked by Love, because I don't think I've done a basketball before. I have links to all of my socials as well as a few ways you can support me down in the description. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!